That's Future Forward.
Up next, Park City Productions 06604 welcomes our friends from Sunraven Holistic Wellness Center back to the WSTC airwaves. Sunraven is located right on the border of Stamford and Bedford, New York. This week, the slow medicine doctor, Michael Finkelstein, and his wife, the slow medicine therapist, Robin Queen Finkelstein, bring us the third installment in Slow Medicine for Couples. The focus is on sex and money.
Hi, welcome back to the show about slow medicine for couples. I'm Michael Finkelstein, also known as the Slow Medicine Doctor, and I'm here with my partner and wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, the Slow Medicine Therapist. We're broadcasting to you from our farm and home and our workspace in Bedford, New York, called Sunraven. It's also called the home of slow medicine because we bring people here to our home, literally, to deal with the stuff in their life that's real. Their relationships in particular, their personal health, their connection to the natural world, their connection to our community and to the natural, to something divine. But what we see here more than anything else is the desire people have to improve the quality of their relationships, which to me is the best barometer for our health. If we have great relationships and we're in a good state to have great relationships, then we're probably healthy. We probably have enough going for us, enough energy, enough clarity of mind, enough spirit of heart to really connect to another person. So that's sort of our philosophy. Last week we spoke about needs and about expressing needs carefully so that we're clear. We're clear to our partners about why we're asking them for things or why we're emotional or why we're reacting to something that's maybe not even personal, but it just is a reaction we're having or a moment in our lives, rather than to be in a habit of maybe concealing some of those things, not because it's an intentional habit, but just because of our past life experiences when we've shared and we've been put down. We learn, unfortunately, sometimes to minimize our vulnerability, and that keeps people separate. So, Robin, last week, it wasn't your idea, it was mine, I must admit, but I thought that we would talk about how the subjects of finances, money, and sex are often where a lot of this comes up. People have anxiety around finances in particular. And in a couple, often there's a different relationship to money that each individual has, a different role they may play in their home. And as a result, there are people who are in the know, people who are not in the know, people who spend, people who don't spend, people who have views of what's valuable and not valuable. These are all obviously, on one level, practical, but on the other, they're really ripe for misunderstanding and miscommunication. And when that happens, and very often it's because it is so practical. I mean, it is what we all need to manage to some extent so that we can afford our lives and take care of our commitments, responsibilities. We need to do this, and if people are not on the same page, then it's really ripe for conflict. So that's one. The other is sex. There is this part of what might define an intimate relationship is the intimacy that happens when people make love. And for most couples, during the early phase of their relationship, the honeymoon phase, let's call it, there's this chemistry, this attraction, there's youthfulness often, relative youthfulness, and a little bit more freedom and exploration, excitement, and then that does get tempered quite often. And when that happens, the needs of those two individuals often, again, gets expressed individually and often not communicated effectively. That leads to a greater chasm, in my experience, and less needs getting met. So it's a vicious cycle. So that's my introduction. Robin, what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, yes, well received. And I just want to point out, to the contrary, these are two very important topics in relationships. And through my experience as a counselor, those are two topics that are extremely difficult for people to talk about, especially with a third party. So
why do you think it's difficult to talk about? That's actually very meaningful. Like, these are often, like, when we go to conferences together, they'll talk about almost every other subject unless the conference is specifically about teaching educators about sex education or financial and abundance workshops. But if it's not specifically that and it's a general theme about relationships or communication, often sex and money are not part of the conference agenda. And that's an interesting thing probably reflects it is a difficult subject to talk about. It's thorny in some way.
Well, that thorniness I would describe as it could be shameful, according to what kind of environment that particular person grew up in. And for most of us, there is a lot of shame. We spoke last week about vulnerability. Again, I'm going to bring it back to my belief is that we are not in touch with fully within ourselves about connecting to our own sensations and our own physical body.
So there's two things. Well, in the subject of sex, that makes clear sense to me, that if we're not comfortable in our body, then we're not necessarily going to be comfortable with somebody else getting that close to our body. So part of that then gets, is what I talk to people about when they ask me about health, and I say, how do you feel? I'm not really asking the superficial question that we ask our friends, when we first pick up the phone. I'm really talking about deep down, how do you feel about yourself? Are you well rested? Do you have energy? Do you feel like you can move the way you'd like to feel? People often, for a variety of reasons, look at themselves, even what we might all agree is a beautiful person. A beautiful person can look at themselves in the mirror and not see the same beauty, because people get very particular about the qualifications of beauty and the standards of beauty, which often are difficult because of what's paraded in front of us on TV and in media. That there are some extraordinarily beautiful people, and it's not average, nor do we all conventionally agree on how we define that. But there are, in anyone's individual mind, their own sort of ideal for beauty. And if we don't match that ideal, then we can say, gee, by contrast, we're not so good looking. And then if that's the self-esteem piece of it, and the self-worth piece of it is related, if we've been abused, if we have been the subject of ridicule in any way, even if it's not about our bodies, we could just lower our, lessen our ability to really feel good in general. And if that's partnered with low energy and digestive tract that doesn't work and a nervous system that's a little, uneasy, then we're talking about not being available to our partners. And that's a big issue.
That's right. So, again, sex and finances, money, they're still outside ourselves. They are not really about going inside and fulfilling our, I'm going to use measurement. They're measured, especially. So they're similar, but I want to start with finances. So finances, our belief is, our mind says, if I have more, I'll be happier and fulfilled. That's the mind. You mentioned people not being connected with their bodies. If we asked ourselves, truly, would that really make us happy? That's a different outcome. The intimacy, it's back to the intimacy with the sex. There's also there's a lot to share about this.
I agree. People think abundance is really proportional to their bank account. So, as opposed to a state of being, a state of feeling. So, a lot of people, if they think about the moment of greatest joy in their life, was not necessarily receiving, let's say, a gift worth thousands of dollars. It might have been, taking a walk in the woods on a beautiful summer day with somebody they loved. And essentially the cost of that was the parking in the, lot. So or it didn't cost anything at all. In fact, a lot of the things that are most joyful tend to come most naturally and often without so much ceremony in front of it, somewhat spontaneous. And so that's the state of abundance really then, is this feeling state. Now, of course, we need a certain amount of money to make the world go round, and being physically impoverished is a very difficult situation. But there's a big gap between the line that defines that type of poverty and the wealth people assume they need before they can begin to feel abundant. Similarly, in relationships, there's this concept of this desire for the orgasm, as an example, and that seems to be the goal. But there's a lot between, let's say, holding hands and an orgasm that could be very valuable. And in fact, when people think about the connections, using your word, that have been most significant in their lives, that really are perhaps part of the reason they're so attracted to the person they ultimately choose as their committed partner. Yes, maybe there was that initial amazing moment, but there was so much that led up to that. There was so much before that that felt like a deeper, more durable connection that promised the hope for that to continue in the future to begin with. So I think that these concepts of abundance and even intimacy are related to those needs that you talked about and the needs for connection.
Yes. And individually, again, the practice here is about being curious about oneself. This will be the practice. This is going to be our conversation, to have a dialogue with yourself and have the awareness of, in the moment, does this feel good before, during, and after? Okay, so that's one thing. What just came to me is, often, this may sound familiar, that men receive and have a whole different experience than women around sex. Women really are, for my belief is, women are so much more in touch with their bodies, from survival, intuitive, from the mother, nurturing, needing to really be in touch with the needs of her children. And what I find, this is my own observation, that men who truly would like to be more present in their bodies are less in their bodies. We can talk about perhaps where that comes from. And the need for sex for them is stronger, that there doesn't need to be all the cuddling and the conversations. They're much more apt to connect in the sex act and be fulfilled on a certain level. So I've been really, just through my own observation with couples, a lot of women say, I need my husband to be nice. And I might say this to you sometimes. I need my husband to be really kind and like we were when we first met in that honeymoon stage. Yeah.
So I get that, and I think that you're onto something. I think there's a difference between the masculine component of our being and the feminine component of our being. I sort of see the ideal then to find a way to getting back to the subject of need expression is for each person to feel legitimate in expressing their needs, to be heard by their partner. It doesn't mean that the needs get met with one single mutual act, but that there could be an exchange, and there could be time for one and time for the other.
I agree, and I would steer away from the evaluation of having it being a right or wrong. I would deepen the question, and I would be curious with men. I know you hold men's groups, and I hold space for women, and there's lots that we can discuss about this. Again, this is just what I observe, that men are less likely to believe that they have deep feelings and emotions and needs. Perhaps that's from society, whatever has been projected onto them. The women who also need to, where they fall short is we give out more. We give out because of our nurturing quality, and then we're actually feeling that we're actually getting from our partners.
There's a lot here. There's a lot here. So women give out more is what you're saying. So I'm going to take the other side of that, which is, yes, women are very often extend themselves and generous that way, but is giving out more with the expectation of receiving back, really giving out more. So that's just a question I have. The other thing you said, which was a generalization about men, I'm also going to take the defensive, which is maybe some men don't believe they have deeper needs, but I'm not sure that that's true for all men. And so I do have a men's group, and that men's group is explicitly an invitation to men who want to talk about things like this. and want to express their needs. And what I find is what you're saying, which I think is very much the case, which is men have a harder time necessarily broaching that subject to get started with it, but yet they do have a deep need, and many men, I believe, have an appreciation for the fact that it would be of value to them to reach into it. So I sort of see this as roles that people have learned through their experiences growing up in a society like ours and winding up with certain tendencies and habits. And so the whole idea of my conversation with you here on air, to be, sort of very transparent about it, is to reflect from our own biases and point of view as men and women, that we too sometimes reflect that in our own language and attitudes. The idea is to break that down, is to see everyone's needs as valid at the level of the individual, and that the idea for a couple is to be able to then respect each other enough to respect that you have a right to those feelings and those needs, given all that you have experienced and the roles of culture and everything else. However, in the idea of the third person in the room being the couple, meaning as opposed to the individuals, there's that center space, that's the devotion of the couplehood, is to say, well, to make that couple as strong as possible, we need to be able to, at times, not only share what we experience individually, but then to be open to relating and meeting in the middle somewhere, without judgment, without right and wrong, and seeing in the other, seeing in our couple partner, their right to have their experience.
Yes. And my passion and my work, again, what I was sharing is about observation. My belief is exactly on your point, is that each person has deep feelings. We're going to call them emotions. Today we're just going to bring in a little emotional intelligence. Emotions inform us of our needs. What I'll go back and I'll resend this is that my belief is, because of society and what was placed on men, men are told that it's not okay to cry, and they need to be strong. They need to be whatever the messages are out there, which therefore men, I believe, are actually, in my experience, deeply rich and full of emotions. And once we start asking the questions and allowing it to be observed in a secure environment, the men emote. Mm-hmm. I would say even more so. I don't like to use a comparison word. Just they're really full, and they are eager
so that's
to
the idea.
Be alive with their emotion.
So that's the idea, to provide, especially in a therapeutic context, to provide the security, in a space where people are, by rule essentially, are going to be honored. Whatever comes up, whatever they share, is honorable.
May I just help explain? A secure environment is a non-threatening environment, which means there isn't judgment.
Yeah.
There aren't opinions. There aren't right or wrongs. Mm-hmm. They are observing. What we want to do more of for ourselves, and even today, you can actually ask yourself more questions. What am I feeling? And observe what your body is different than evaluation. Mm-hmm. Evaluation tends to come after the honeymoon stage is worn off in the relationship, and then we're back to that old place of sometimes feeling separate and alone.
So I think this is a good place to leave off, even though this is one of those conversations that never really feels complete, because maybe there's not a real final answer to it. But I like the idea of the conversation being partly what we can share, because we're sharing a common experience that I think everyone has, and to realize, one, they're not alone, but two, there are ways of dealing with it, which is to honor it, to really understand that it exists. It exists largely because of cultural norms, the challenges that people face, and history, meaning of the individual and when they were young, and maybe when things were repressed in them for one reason or other, self-protection. It was a necessity. We all learned to care for ourselves that way and get a little defensive, and as a result, when we wind up in a couple 20 years later, then it's challenging to let that out again. So secure environments are really important. But I liked what you said, and to leave off with this idea about being an observer, observing without judgment, which is one of the key things for couples and individuals in life in general, is to witness what happens. And instead of rushing right away to evaluation and to determination, is this right or wrong, or good or bad, or any of those dualistic concepts, it's just to see it and try to get, with curiosity, explore deeper beneath what's the most obvious, to understand there's a big, long story for that individual to have just expressed what they just did.
And there's a need.
And this is what I think most people who meet and fall in love, as an example, are in that moment. They're in that observer mentality. Everything is new. Everything is a curiosity. And it's interesting. If we can return to that, everything is interesting. Because after the first months, years, we've already seen the superficial layers. Now we're getting to the next series of layers, which are deeper and deeper. And if we can still maintain that sense of interesting, curiosity, because this all led to this person we fell in love with to begin with. So it's all part and parcel of the whole thing. So without judgment, with the real acceptance and interest, and then humility, because we're not without our warts also, and we can each in any given moment be difficult, but we have an agreement to communicate our needs clearly, create the secure context in our lives, in our homes, find people like you who can help us learn the skills of a dialogue and communication that can really make a difference, because sometimes this just doesn't come naturally. We don't have role models necessarily that have done this for us or before us. So that's what my intention is with you, to continue to share this conversation with others. And so if people are, if you're listening and you like what you're hearing, come to our website, slowmedicine.org. Robin can be reached directly if you want to tell her what you heard and shared, and sort of reflect a little bit on her brilliance, or anything that you felt was not clear. Robin at slowmedicinetherapist.com, and I'm Michael at slowmedicinedoctor.com if you want to reach me directly. We'll hope to see you on the airwaves soon. So take care of yourself, take care of the couple between you, and we all can help each other with this world around us that's in desperate need as well of some care.
Slow Medicine for Couples is a Park City Productions 06604 presentation. Learn more about this program and many others made available. Or if you'd like to host your own radio program, drop us a note at parkcityproductions06604 @gmail.com.